Have you had an encounter you'd like to share on this channel? Well, if so, send me an email with all the details. You can email me at contact@buckeyebigfoot.com. Hey there, everyone, and welcome to Buckeye Bigfoot. Now, we're going to start tonight with a couple of comments that were left, some of them back in December on some videos, and then we're going to head into our main story. So grab your snackage, saddle up, let's get going. Hi, Nance. I saw some tracks 2 years ago in the first week of December, possibly 3 years ago. There were 3 sets of these tracks, side by side. We had had our first light dusting of snow. There was barely an inch on the frozen ground. These tracks came from across the road. There's woods all around. The tracks came from the woods across the road and went between 2 houses and then to the home directly across from me. They crossed the road and came to the driver's side of my vehicle. They, for some reason, turned at that spot by my car and went back the way they came. These tracks were there for days. The one set of tracks was about 18 inches long, not counting the very defined claws that were longer than my fingers. Those claws had very sharp tips that pierced the frozen ground. I have really been frustrated with myself for not taking photos of these, especially considering how long those tracks were there. So if you happen to read this comment, my question is, does anyone ever describe the prints of a dog man to you? Or better yet, a photo? I've lived in this area most of my life, and I have seen a Sasquatch very near me in daylight, not 20 minutes from where I presently live in 1974. These tracks I'm describing here, though, they are not that of a Sasquatch. Those claws were incredibly long. My uncle tells me of his own encounter outside Kamloops, but basically out in the rural middle of nowhere. He and 3 of his friends, shortly after graduating high school in the early to mid-2000s, were off-roading. A tire pops as a sharp rock must have pierced. And just when they were about to stop and go through the process of replacing with a spare, my uncle says that all 4 of them heard what sounds like a really messed up scream. Between a scream and a yell, but not like any person could make, but almost animalistic. One of his friends had a buggy and a dog. I remember because when he heard that kind of really loud and powerful vocalization, the dog immediately got back into the vehicle. Mind you, this was a dog who was fearless and really outgoing, but whatever had yelled or screamed out in the pitch black of night scared the dog instantly. As my uncle is 4th in position, he's trying to use a flashlight to keep the eyes on the tire to replace. They're a bit freaked out. If I remember, how he told it was that the yell got closer and they're really starting to panic. And my uncle says that he heard movement in the bushes right beside him moving, like there was something walking around really heavily and deliberately. He tried to use the flashlight to get a look, but his friend just scolded him saying, "Man, stop. Put the effing light right back over here." And my uncle responds, "Dude, I heard something right behind the bushes. I swear it's really close." His friend just says forget it and keep the light. And as the tire was replaced and they started up their off-road vehicles, a tree came crashing down, just where the last 2 were at. I found this story really fascinating, as anyone who's ever drove out in the direction of Kamloops and Williams Lake can attest. It's a lot of open hills and mountain ranges, and a lot of forest. I only asked him if the dog was known to be scared easily, and if he thought there was only the one Bigfoot. To which he would respond, the dog was really outgoing and wanted to be friends with everyone he met. My uncle thinks it was only the one, and if it matches the kind of description here, they can cover ground fast. I've never asked the other 3 what their recounts of the story was. I was recently told this story by my uncle, whom I trust to not just make something up like this. I don't have my own personal experience because I've hardly ever spent time out in the country. I think they are real regardless. Awesome story, Kurt. I grew up with Sasquatch in Wisconsin, and then when I moved to the bush of the Delta Junction near Ghost Mountain, Mount Hayes, I continued to have them mess with me when I would go to the woodshed, etc., including banging on my truck as soon as I got into it. And one night when I came from Fairbanks at 1 a.m, it stepped out in front of my truck and stood in my headlights and let me see it while it shaded its eyes, and then it walked into the woods. There were definitely some evil Sasquatch, and the rest just seemed to be curious. I'm looking at land over near Talkeetna. Maybe I'll run into one of your friends. Was cleaning up multiple camper debris left behind near a creek that was just below a 10 to 12 foot high cliff area, Pacific Northwest. Area was lovely after the garbage was all picked up, so out came the phone for a video. Almost instantly, I felt something whiz by my head. Bark bits flew, some hitting me in the side. I left the area, but later remembered the video I started to take, so sat down to watch it. There was nothing on it beside the forest and creek below, except for the haunting sound of the rock that whizzed by me, barely missing my head, and the sound of it hitting the tree hard. I could also hear the thud of the rock hitting the tree, then the ground. The force was alarming. I can imagine the damage could have been very debilitating in the least, if I had not moved the few inches I did at the very moment I did. My name is Larry, and what happened to me and my friends one summer in 1997, well, it's something I still think about. I was with two of my good friends. I'll call them Curly and Mo. We had been camped out at the Pinecrest campground by the lake in the Stanislaus Forest. We had stayed through the days that we had paid for, and we were running out of money, but we still had some more days to burn up. So we decided to do some hidden off-trail camping. We had been hiking different trails in the area, and one stuck out for us as being the right place to do some hidden camping. The Trail of the Gargoyles. I swear to God, that really is the name of the trail. It's a short hike, just over a mile, but it follows the rim of the mountain and connects up to some other trails. The walking path is mostly level, but it runs along sheer drop-offs along the mountainside, and it gives you incredible views. We chose an area along that trail that had a high back wall to one side and the drop-off on the other side of the trail. The side with the high back wall went up about maybe 20 feet. Between the wall and the trail was an area about 30 feet wide, full of junipers and other scrub brush that we could hide in. We hiked up just before sundown. We found our area and hung around waiting, making sure there were no other hikers coming or going. After a while, we set up near the wall along the cliff just before darkness. But we didn't make a fire that night, mostly because we didn't need one. But when we looked out over the drop-off out to the front of the trail, we saw 4 tiny fires. So we weren't the only ones camping where they shouldn't have been. My friend Mo, let me tell you about him. He was a big believer in Bigfoot, but at the same time, he was always making jokes out of it. Everything he said was about Bigfoot, especially when we went camping. If we went into the woods to take care of business, he'd be sure to tell us to be careful that Bigfoot didn't grab us. If there was a noise anywhere, day or night, at any time, he'd say, "Yep, that was Bigfoot. He's coming for us." Then he would laugh. But me and Mo, we had some deep talks, and he really did believe in Bigfoot. Me, I wasn't sure either way. There was a partial moon that night, giving off a weak light. All the campfires down the drop-off area were out by 10 p.m. The 3 of us were sitting in the darkness, not quite ready to go to sleep. We had been accustomed to sitting up talking late, but we had a fire to sit around. Well, we didn't have that, so we sat and talked in the dark. When we heard someone walking up the trail from the south of us, we instinctively went quiet. This trail is level and it's well kept, but it's not the kind of trail you want to walk at night. I was the closest to the line of brush and junipers along the trail, but I didn't see any light of any kind. Any normal person out there walking, they're going to have a flashlight or a headlamp. That is not the trail to walk at night. You could take a wrong step and go off a cliff very easily. We waited and listened. As the footsteps came closer, I thought the sounds seemed to hit heavy onto the earth. They weren't the light, scratch gravel crunching of a person walking. I wondered if it could be a bear, as I know black bears were there in the Stanislaus. But the rhythm of the steps, they didn't fit the padding of a bear's 4 paws. But it also didn't sound like a person's footsteps either. I could just see through the brush branches if I held them back. And though the moon wasn't bright, I could see the differences in shadows and darknesses when I looked out over the drop-off rim. The footsteps walked right past our position. I can't say that I saw it clearly, but I can say I saw its shadow, and it was big. Really, really big. And it was clearly walking on just 2 feet. It passed, and I let out the breath that I didn't know I had been holding. The 3 of us whispered about what had just happened. We thought maybe it was a ranger walking by. Maybe it was a bear or another hiker. I did try to play it off like it was a forest ranger or something like that. I wasn't trying to lie to them. It was truly that I didn't know what to say. After a few minutes, we were relaxed again and went back to normal talking. At some point, Curly told a viciously funny joke, and we all bust out laughing. We didn't mean to, but the sound carried. We were coming off of our laughing hard and calming down when we heard a pounding of footsteps coming back down the trail, coming from the direction the footsteps had gone up just a few minutes before. No chance those footsteps were human. They were seriously pounding the dirt hard. We froze and stayed quiet where we were. We heard the footsteps slow down before they got to us. It was going slow. It sounded like it was looking for something. I could hear branches moving, like they were being pushed aside. Then my skin crawled when I heard a sound of some kind of vocalization. Then branches were being whacked back and forth, like it was smacking them, trying to flush us out of hiding. But luckily, it wasn't where we were. Then it really did hit me. It was looking for us. It was hunting for us. My skin crawled. We did have knives and bear spray, but that was all we had. And I didn't want to make noise getting either out of the pack. The noise of branches being hit suddenly stopped, and there was total silence. It was waiting. That was my thought. It was waiting for us to make a sound, to move, to come out. I am not positive, but I guess it was about 50 feet from us, give or take, up the trail. The 3 of us were hardly breathing. We didn't say it, but we all 3 knew something was really wrong about all of this. Then there was another sound that came from right above us. It sounded like a drunk Ewok with a very deep voice. It made some sounds, and right away the one up the trail from us answered right back. It answered with a long string of sounds, and it sounded pissed off, if I could say that. Then I realized we are what had pissed it off, maybe by being on its mountain at night. The one above made more noise. They were communicating, that is for sure. The last to speak was the one above us, and it was spooky when it stopped talking. It stopped abruptly, and the only thing heard from the one on the trail near us was a grunting, huffing sound, maybe an acknowledgement, or maybe it didn't like what the other one said. It was a cool night on the mountain, but I could feel sweat rolling down the center of my back, and I felt beads of sweat on my face. We three waited in silence. It was trying to be stealthy, but the scratching noise on the path from its footsteps, well, that was still there. A little twist of the gravel, and I would hear that crunching sound, however soft it was trying to make it. I heard branches parting again and again, this time slowly, quietly, with more care. It was coming closer and closer. Our only hope was that it wouldn't come as far back as we were. There was a line of junipers and some other scrub in front of us, at least 10 feet deep off from the trail. From somewhere down below, way off in the drop-off rim area, where we had seen a few fires earlier, someone yelled out a weak, "Hello?" Then we heard what I thought they meant to say as, "Are you okay?" The sounds we heard were faint, and they echoed, but they were heard. Whatever was on the trail heard it too. It made a huffing grunt sound, but it drew it out longer to where the grunt was almost a purring growl. Then it came to us. It parted the junipers in front of us. We held our breath and stayed low behind the other brush, praying that this thing relied on sight rather than smell. It held the branches for just a few more moments, and I was sure it knew we were there. I was sure we were dead, and I didn't even know what it was, really. My mind had blanked out once I knew it wasn't a bear or a human, and somehow I couldn't think beyond that. I heard it carefully moving more branches, and I thought, it sounds like it's slowly walking into our position. I didn't know if Mo had gotten the bear spray ready somehow or not. It was carried on his pack. There was literally nowhere for us to go. We were trapped with our backs up against a mountain cliff wall, and there was that thing in front of us. We had nowhere to go. I can't explain to you how I knew it was of immense size in the darkness, but I did know. I either sensed it or picked it up some other way, but I knew it. I also was sure if it got us, we wouldn't be alive for long. There was something very predatory about its search for us. It was being methodical, checking everywhere. It was being silent and careful. This was not some curious creature. By my guess in the dark, it was about 4 seconds away from touching me when there was a loud vocal sound from the cliff above us once again. The one somewhere in front of us backed away and out of the junipers. I heard the branches fall back into place. I felt the air move as they whooshed. Then the one out on the trail answered the one above us. The people somewhere down below must have thought we were just playing with them, because now they were laughing, and they were making fake whooping sounds and carrying on. You know, sound sure carries in the darkness on a mountainside. After it was done communicating with the other one, the footsteps continued on down the trail. I suppose it either didn't realize it hadn't checked our area completely, or it was distracted and had forgotten. But we listened as it moved on down the trail, checking other places. Curly and Mo started to whisper back and forth, talking about how we should make a run for it and get out of there now. I told them to shut up. I really didn't know how good its hearing was, but they could maybe be heard. I also didn't know where the one above us was. I told them we're going to sit tight. We have knives and bear spray. Let's make them ready. And we did manage to get them out of the packs quietly. It was maybe 10 minutes later. We heard footsteps coming back up the trail, but this time at a jogging pace. We listened as it went right by us. I almost breathed a sigh of relief, but then I heard another set of footsteps coming up the trail after the first one. I don't know if it was the one from above or perhaps a third one. Either way, we were trapped on that mountain, in that spot, until at least daybreak. I was not going to try to get off that mountain in the dark with this large shadow thing running around. And we did get out of there as soon as the sun came up. We had spent a very uncomfortable night there. The first thing that all three of us did as soon as we felt it was safe enough to stand up was to go answer a call of Mother Nature. We'd been holding it all night, afraid to move, and we sure weren't going to go where we had to sit. We did that quickly, watching each other's backs. Then we jogged down the mountain with our heads on swivels. I know people listening will say we should have done this or that, but bear in mind, we were just 18 and 19 years old. None of us had been in the military at that point. None of us were big hunters. We just liked getting lost in the forest, enjoying lakes, and spending time camping. But of course we got more than we bargained for that night. I believe it was a Bigfoot, or as they say up there, a Sasquatch. I know of nothing else that could have done all of that in the darkness on the rim of a mountain. I think about the steps I heard. They were 2-footed, not 4-footed. They were thundering, and they were heavy on that packed trail. And those weird sounds and the communications, I still get raised hair on the back of my arms when I think about them. I've searched the internet over, and I haven't found anything exactly like what I heard. The Sierra sounds, well, they're kind of close, but not exact. But I guess that might make sense because the Stanislaus is part of the Sierra Nevadas. Mo, the biggest Bigfoot believer of us all, he was silent as we left. He barely spoke on the way home. I guess he was digesting it all. When I asked him if he thought that was a Bigfoot, he didn't even let me get the whole sentence out. Yes, he said, yes, that's exactly what it had to be. What else could it have been? The more I've read up on the mystery known as Bigfoot, the more convinced I am that we were being hunted by a Bigfoot that night. It was looking for us, no doubt. Our laughter let it know we were there, and I don't think it was happy. What it would have done if it had found us, I don't like to speculate. There's no scenario that I can think of that would have been a good one. I'm an older and wiser man now, and I know I would have done a lot of things differently that night, being the man that I am today. But during that experience, I had just turned 19. I didn't have a lot of experience to draw on. I didn't actually see the Bigfoot that night, but I believe and I know that is what was on that mountain with us that night. That is what was hunting us. And I really think we are lucky to have walked off that mountain that night. You can sign me, Larry.